Sergey. The idea of praying that God himself to deliver me from lies first came to me under rather unusual circumstances. It so happened that I found myself in a difficult situation, and very timely. One of the brothers from our church suggested that I rent a room with him in a communal apartment. It was very inexpensive. I thanked God for such a miraculous solution to my housing problems and could now tackle the rest. However, while helping me solve one problem, Sergey, that's what I'll call this brother, created another for me. The thing is, Sergey and I were completely different people. I grew up in a small but still in a city, and in our culture it holds great significance. Sergey grew up in a peasant family. I learned to read at 5 and read a whole library before school, but Sergey didn't. I'm an introvert and clearly inclined to reflection, while Sergey simply didn't have time for that. But the main difference between us was that Sergey had an almost infinite ability to trust authorities, while I was practically devoid of this ability. So, God's miracle was of slightly larger format than I initially assumed. In Sergey, I found not only a beneficent brother, for whom I am still grateful for his help, but also an otherness in the most philosophical sense. Being brothers in faith, we simultaneously represented for each other a kind of antimatter. I don't know about Sergey, but for me, it worked, and thanks to this book, it might work for you too. Just like me, Sergey was not a native of Kiev, and did not have his own housing. Since Sergey saw no way to even afford the cheapest apartment in Kiev, he hoped for miraculous help from God and had a reliable plan for it. In addition to diligent prayer, Sergey based this plan on the testimony of a brother from our community, who supernaturally received an apartment after he started helping the homeless. As far as I remember, it was a gift from relatives, that he had not expected at all, or something similar. Inspired by this testimony, Sergey began to look for whom he could help with the intention that one day God would also give him an apartment. As you may have guessed, I became the person Sergey directed his charity towards. All this would not be worth mentioning if it weren't for the fact that Sergey was also convinced that God does not give apartments for help to unworthy heretics. I wouldn't want you to think that Sergey and I often clashed due to differences in views. Quite the opposite. But sometimes the scythe did hit the stone, and we had to find a way out of the situation. And these situations also gave me plenty of food for thought. When we had discussions on theological topics, at any moment I could hear something like, "But the pastor doesn't say that." After which Sergey would burst into pure childish laughter and consider me completely and definitively defeated. If I didn't give in and insisted on something that contradicted how Sergey understood the pastor's words, he would become extremely agitated, and he would look calmer if he found a dismembered body under my bed, than if he discovered that someone in our community might agree with the pastor's opinion even slightly less than fervently. It can't be said that in order to become a member of our community, full agreement with everything the pastor says was a mandatory condition. On the contrary, in every sermon, the pastor strongly recommended everyone to check all his words for compliance with the Bible. Likewise, no one urged blindly repeating the successful experience of others, for understandable reasons. But the problem with people is that they decide it wouldn't hurt to take a test for common sense only after they've hit their forehead, and even then, not everyone. Alas, Sergey believed that the ultimate victory of Christianity and the solution to all problems lay in everyone unquestioningly listening to the pastor. Naturally, any theological discussions between us soon ceased. Well, if Sergey prefers to rely on someone else's opinion, there's nothing I can do about it. But what about myself? Compared to Sergey, I should have been in a better position, but is that really the case? I started to see a lot of Sergey in myself. I am first and foremost sincerely grateful to this guy for the help he provided me. And not just for that. His example was a powerful push for me to start more carefully scrutinizing everything I believe in, trust, and consider self-evident. I've never been a naive simpleton, but the push I got from observing Sergey's life literally propelled me to a new level of awareness of how much unverified information and outright lies, even if sometimes unintentional, surround me, which can easily turn my life into hell, or even kill me. There have never been such people in my environment before, Sergey was in many ways not a bad and clever guy, but he practically didn't live by his own mind. He couldn't come to any convictions himself and desperately needed a leader. If his leader fell, Sergey would fall along with him, so he supported the leader as much as his own life. But what if the pastor is wrong? Pastors make mistakes, just like everyone else. What if God does not have a stable reward for good deeds, and God does not give an apartment to everyone who lets a homeless person stay overnight? What if a good deed is considered good before God only when it is done without any selfish motives? How do I explain to Sergey that even the Holy Spirit is not against being tested and certainly doesn't require blind belief in the pastor? I have a very rich imagination, and I immediately pictured Sergey as Hachiko at his owner's grave. Here he has nothing to wait for, but he is unable to leave this place. Well, a wise person should learn from other people's mistakes. I began to delve into what was happening in my own head. I have read many books, received a fairly good education. My professional activity is related to analysis and information processing. Most of my social circle consists of people who can be classified as intellectuals. Those who know me note my observant nature and ability to make fairly deep conclusions. At least my abilities would be more than enough for me to easily dominate in an argument with Sergey, a rural paramedic. But at that moment, God showed me that my capacity for error is no less than that of Sergey's. The results of my investigation led me to humility. I still felt intellectually superior to Sergey, but I also began to realize clearly that we were in the same boat when it came to how much falsehood was in our heads. Believe me, I had nothing left but to exclaim, God, deliver me from all kinds of lies.